Great. Good morning, everyone. I see people are just joining, so we're very excited to have you here this morning for this year's informational webinar on the Burton Critical Needs and Opportunity Fund. We'll give people just a minute or two more, well, just a minute more to join, and then we'll jump in. All right. Again, welcome. My name is Amy Lemley. I'm the Executive Director of John Burton Advocates for Youth, and we're very excited to have you here this morning to launch the 23-24 Burton Critical Needs and Opportunity Fund. Hard to believe. I'm still getting used to 2023, let alone 2024, but we do know that it's coming around the bend here, and we want to get ready and give people as much time as possible to complete the necessary paperwork, spend the remainder of the funds for this year, and begin an exciting year next year. So with that, next slide, please. So here is what we are going to do today. I'm going to give a brief recap of the 22-23 program, talk about the youth eligibility and the use of funds. Then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague. Many of you have heard from her, Laura Young, who is the point person for the program. We're sad to share, I think many of you knew that Susan was in a transition most of last year, but has made that transition fully, and she's living in the East Coast very happily, and we're delighted to have Loris joining us. So she's going to talk about the 23-24 process. We're going to take a brief pause to help to give people who haven't had a chance to give us complete our feedback survey a time to do that. And then I'm going to turn it over to our development associate, Jeffrey Lee, who's going to talk about what programs can do to help us sustain the program, the Critical Needs Fund, and then talk about opportunities for youth interviewing. So that's what we have on deck. So without further ado, next slide, please. And even before we start any of that, just please do, anytime you have any questions, submit those questions on the panel. Jeffrey, Loris, and I are all going to be collecting them, and we'll make sure to get to them. You know, we have a whole hour scheduled for this webinar. I don't think it's going to take that long. The information is pretty straightforward, and everyone on today's webinar is a participant in the current year program. So we're definitely going to have a chance to get to all of your questions. So again, as you have them, go ahead and chat them, and we'll make sure to answer them. And then, as usual, all of our presentation materials and the video will be sent out via email, along with a bunch of other links that we're going to talk about over the course of today's webinar. Next slide, please. So here is what we have done collectively through April 10th, 2023. And we get this information from the Youth Disbursement Form that's completed by the 76 different organizations participating in the program. It's been a lot of great work that you have all done. It's a lot of fun to see how the resources are being used. Interestingly, you can see here, it's a 2-to-1 in terms of the number of young women that are being served versus young men. That's kind of interesting. You can see how the number of young men and young women, non-binary and transgender individuals break out. In terms of racial and ethnic participation, you have that on the right-hand side of the screen as well. And so we, track this information. Our goal is to ensure that the program is being used equitably based on kind of the participation in programs and the California state population as well. So this was some background information on who has participated, who's utilized the program during the current program year. Next slide. And this is a little bit about how they've used it. So the 3 items in red are the most frequently used uses. Education being number 1. About 1 in 3 of the young people that were assisted used it for an education purpose. We saw a lot of specialized equipment for classes, cameras, special equipment that's required on the syllabus but that they needed extra support for. Transportation is a very major use, a lot of transportation issues, young people getting to and from school, getting to and from work, getting everywhere, and then housing. A lot of emergency rental assistance, help with startup costs, just a wide range of uses there. So those were the top three. I guess the other thing I would note is enrichment, while it wasn't in those top three, it was still 6%. So we did see it used for about 70 young people to date for that purpose, which, again, this is a very flexible source of funding. And so if a young person needs that extra financial support to make a lesson, a class, some kind of, a travel opportunity possible, the funds can certainly be used for that. So overall, we are agnostic really on these uses. We're, our main goal is to make the resources available to you so that you can meet the individual urgent need of the young person. And so this is how it looks to date through April 10th. Next slide, please. So as I said, Loris is our new office manager. We're really excited to have her on board. She comes to us from Canada and before that, Australia. So those of you who've had a chance to talk to her, you'll recognize that. She's just doing a great job, very receptive, great communicator, and I think you'll all really enjoy working with her. So if you have any question now, you can certainly, there's her email, there's our office phone number. Don't be shy. She's happy to have a conversation with you or clarify anything that you don't get clarified today. Next slide, please. Well, so here is really the goal of the program. As the name of the program states, we're helping young people who've been in foster care or homeless by providing them with easily accessible financial assistance to address a critical need or facilitate an opportunity. So the idea is, very low barrier, almost immediately provided financial support, the kind of support that is often available to people who have that kind of family resource. But so often young people who have been in foster care or homeless do not have that person to turn to. So the idea, an ounce of prevention, being there at that right moment when a young person needs it can really help young people stay on track and sustain their progress. So that is the goal of the program. Next slide. And so this program, it is by participation is by invitation only. We're asking you, please don't share the links to the application. And it is, not guaranteed. So we need to just share that. Many of the organizations that are here on today's webinar were longtime participants in the Burton Book Fund. And as you know, we generalized the use, broadened the use, liberalized the use in order to meet a broader range of needs, because we were really hearing from campuses that books were great, but young people have other urgent needs that are equally critical. And so we're happy to be able to respond to that need. We also changed the program to allow young people who have experienced homelessness and not foster care to be eligible. And so far it's gone really well this year. We're excited to see how it's moved forward. It's been a pretty smooth transition. Next slide, please. So again, here are the eligibility criteria for the Burton Critical Needs and Opportunity Fund. They're very broad. The age range is between 16 and 26. So if a young person is 16 or they're 26, it's not under age 26, it's 26, have been in foster care or experienced homelessness at any time. So, I can't state that emphatically. If they were homeless as a 12-year-old, if they do not have to be in foster care or homeless currently, if they have any history of foster care experience or homelessness experience, as your program evaluates. So we've got some very broad criteria here. Live in California, and they're not required to be students. And we add that because, as I said, many organizations were formerly part of the Burton Book Fund. That program was focused on currently enrolled students. That is not a requirement. And so 16 to 26, in foster care or experienced homelessness at any time. That could have been when they were in the custody, when they were living with their family as a minor. Again, we want this to be available to the young people you serve, and this is generally the group that you do serve. Next slide, please. So again, the uses are many. The whole goal is to be as low barrier as possible. And so it can be used to pay for any type of critical need or opportunity. And so we have some examples on the slides here. I mean, if they do need help with textbooks, textbooks are still very expensive. School supplies, school fees, transportation expenses, deposits, obtaining mental or dental care, music or art classes, athletic programs or supplies. You know, it's really meant to be that extra dollar that's available when a young person needs it most to meet their specific need. It's a very broad criteria that you can apply to address the individual young person that presents themselves. Next slide, please. There is no spending limit. We get asked that a lot. There is no minimum and there is no maximum. And that's really at the discretion of your organization. And we just ask you, please, to use the knowledge of the young person's specific circumstance and your professional judgment. And so our organization, we also allocate ourselves some money to distribute, because we have a lot of young people who contact us. And so, you know, we have our judgment we use. Some things that have come up, we sometimes have young people who ask multiple times. Our organization has decided, you know, we're out of fairness, we're going to, you know, not do more than one grant per young person. But even that is at your professional discretion. If you would evaluate their circumstances that you evaluate it's a good idea to give a young person a second grant, that really is in your purview. And so we know you're all, you know the circumstances best. You're working the most closely with the young people. You know what the range of benefits they're able to access is. You know what funding your organization gets. And so you're in the best position to consider all those factors, evaluate the situation, and make a determination based on that. So but there really is no minimum and there is no maximum. Next slide, please. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Loris, who's going to talk about the process for the upcoming program year.
Hi, everyone. I want to say thank you and welcome all to the webinar that we have today. So I'll be talking about what the process is for the 2023 and 2024 process, by giving you the deadlines and the due dates. Next slide, please, Jeffrey. So this is a program timeline overview. So after this webinar, I'll be sending an application form to everyone that has attended and participated in this webinar. And we would request that the applications be due by April 28th. And then after that, our 22-23 spending deadline is going to be May 15th. So we'll be reviewing all the organizations from last year to see if they've spent all their allocated funding. And then once we've determined which organizations have been spent and also applied for the 23-24 program, we'll be sending them the MOUs and the contracts to review and to be signed by May 26th. Once we've got all those information, we'll be dispersing the first round of checks on week of July 24th. And then we'll have the spending deadline for that round one by December 8th. Then I'll be reviewing the organizations who spent their round one funding allocation to see if they will be eligible to receive the second round check. And that will be dispersed on the week of January 22nd. And then the round two spending deadline will be May 3rd, 2024. Don't worry, we'll be sending all this information to you after the email, so you will have this information. And as Amy has mentioned before, it'll be available on our website as well. Next slide, please, Jeffrey. So just a little bit of information about what we'll be requesting from you in terms of our application form. So we do require that the organization who would be applying be a non-profit, even if you are a post-secondary institution. So the applicant cannot be an individual. So if a campus can't accept the funding directly, please note, identify a non-profit that can serve as the applicant. So as I mentioned before, we'll be sending out an application form to the organizations who have attended a webinar today. The deadline to apply is April 28th, and we will assess applicants and review if they met last year's terms and conditions. So for example, if you spent all your spending allocations by May 15th, the deadline. Next slide, please. So what kind of information will we be collecting on the application forms? So we'll be requiring names, emails, and phone numbers for 2 staff contacts that I can liaise with. We will also require 1 contact person to be publicly listed on our roster that will be available on our website. We'll also require the name of the nonprofit and the tax ID number as well. That will be entering into the agreement with JBay. So we will need like the tax ID and a W-9 form as well. Next slide. So in terms of the funding amount and the deadlines, so depending on the number of organizations and the type of organization applicants that will be receiving for the 23-24 program round, the organizations can expect to receive between $5,000 to $9,000 for the 23-24 year. As mentioned before, there'll be 2 rounds of funding disbursement and spending deadlines. So the first round will be week of July 24th, and the spending deadline for that will be December 8th. And then the second round of disbursement will be week of January 22nd, and then the spending deadline will be May 3rd. Next slide, please. So I'm sure all of you must know in my emails and from last year's information webinar as well. So, and as also as Amy mentioned just now, so please disperse the funds to youth using your knowledge of the youth specific circumstances and your professional judgment. Please complete the electronic youth disbursement form every time a student is awarded funds within 48 hours. As mentioned before, you can use funds exclusively for expenses or an opportunity for the youth that's meeting their critical needs. And please maintain records of these expenditures for at least 1 year after completion of the use of the grant funds as well. So just in case, we might need to ask for a record of what expenses was provided or the youth that was dispersed to, please at least maintain records of this disbursement and expenditure. Next slide, please. It doesn't hurt to mention again, but I will, is to be eligible to receive the round 2 of funding and be invited to participate in future funding. We do require that all organizations spend the allocated round by the deadline and submit the youth disbursement form. And please note that the total amount submitted on the youth disbursement form must cumulatively total to the grant amount provided to your organization as well. So if we gave you $5,000, please make sure that the total amount submitted on the youth disbursement form equals to $5,000 at the end too. And what is the purpose of the youth disbursement form? Well, the purpose of the youth disbursement form is that the information collected advises JBay, which is me, whether you've been dispersing the funds and if we should send you the next round of funding as well, and whether I should send you my weekly gentle nudge reminder emails to spend the allocated funding too. Next slide, please. So we do, as I mentioned before in one of my previous emails, we do have a feedback survey. So there's a QR code, and I'll be putting the survey link in the chat as well for all of you. We really would appreciate your feedback for the Burton Critical Needs and Opportunity Fund. It's important to us to get your feedback, and all feedback is anonymous and confidential as well. And it will help us to improve the program and to learn how the program funds was used for the program as well.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey. So I'm just going to briefly talk about how you can be a partner in helping us raise funds for this program. So it's because of all the generous supportive donors that we were able to launch this program last year. And so this year we are organizing another campaign to keep this program going in the future. And our goal is to raise $250,000. So we'll be sending a package to our donors, but also the other main component is promoting it on social media. So I'm going to put in the chat our social media platforms. So if you haven't already, please follow us so that you can keep track of what we're posting. So this will be, our campaign will be throughout the month of May and into early June. So give you some time to check out our platforms and follow us just right now if you haven't done so already. So what we would really like your help with is amplifying our social media posts. So throughout the month of May, we'll be posting on our various platforms about the program and just the youth that we help and just like spreading awareness. And so you can amplify our posts by liking and sharing those. And then we're also going to be sharing a flyer and a social media toolkit with you in a follow-up email after the webinar. And so those will have all the details on with a flyer, with a QR code, and template of social media posts that you can tailor to your organization. And then also if your organization isn't that active on social media, you can also post in other ways, like through a blog or in a regular newsletter that you send out. So I'm just going to put the link to the flyer right now so you can download it. Yeah, and then I just want to send another reminder about the youth interviews that we're doing. So JB is interested in learning about the impact of the fund and hearing about the youth that have received funding. So youth can receive a $25 gift card for having a 30-minute interview with us just to share their experiences in school and in foster care or homelessness. And so you can provide the youth's information if they are open to that at the end of the youth disbursement form. So thank you to everyone that has already been doing that. And just letting you know that we'll be continuing to do that in the future. And I will just put a link also to our website where we have 7 youth profiles of youth that have received funding. And so you can check that out in your own time and see examples of what that might look like. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Jeffrey. So we have one more slide with has that same information. And again, you'll get all this electronically. But why don't we go now to Q&A? Maybe next slide. And maybe while people are writing their questions and we're moving to that next slide, I just also want to say that we recognize these are not the largest grants. And we don't want anyone to feel, I guess I don't know another way to say it, don't feel bad if you decide this isn't the right program for you. We've been collecting the feedback, and we do know that a lot of organizations have other sources of highly flexible, low barrier funding. We asked that question. And so, you've got to do what works for your organization. And, we would never judge anyone to be like, oh, turn away money. It's like, we all know every dollar we get needs to be carefully administered and thoughtfully administered. So, if this isn't the right fit for you, or you're kind of balancing these different kind of grant priorities, there's absolutely, clearly no judgment on our end. We know everyone is doing their best to bring in different resources and bring them all together. And so I just want to make sure to put that out there to think like, so that that's our feeling, because we as a grant seeking organization, sometimes it's like, is this kind of worth it in terms of the amount of money for the administration? And only you can know that answer. And so if it is, we're really excited to partner with you, but if it's not, we understand that too. So just want to say that. Well, let's jump into Q&A then. Thanks so much for your questions. The first one is a very good one, and is, can we increase the amount we receive next year? And I think the answer there is we don't know. We don't know how many organizations will spend their full allocation this year, how many will want to participate. Again, this was a kind of a pilot year. You may have said, oh, that youth disbursement form is kind of a pain. I don't really like it. And again, that's totally, that's, your judgment. And so we'll see how many organizations come back, how many want to participate, and we will allocate the full amount. So it's possible, but I really can't say at this point. This is just a comment. It said the bit.ly link is not working for me. So I think that might be the flyer, Jeffrey, that you sent out. If you could maybe,
yeah, I'll see if I can get a different link, but also we'll make sure to share it with you in the follow-up email. So you'll have the flyer and the toolkit and everything. Yeah.
Great. Good question. Will all the youth who consent to be interviewed be interviewed? Jeffrey, would you answer that one?
No, we won't be interviewing everyone because there'll be a lot of youth there. So yeah, we'll just, yeah, it's just a consent, but we only reach out to a select few.
Mm-hmm. So here's a comment. It says, I print out my Google form submission, but who do we contact to make sure? So why don't I turn that over to Loris to answer?
Hi, yes. So for the youth disbursement form or the application form, please reach out to me to make sure that, once you've applied, I've received it. Yeah, please reach out to me for any questions about that or about the disbursements. Yeah.
And we definitely want that to be completed online, like not printed out. So if you're printing it out, save yourself some paper, just enter it directly into the Google Sheet. And again, Loris can give you any kind of guidance around that if you'd like it. So a lot of comments about the flyer, but we will get that flyer out. What kind of documentation do you need for how the funds were used by the student? The kind of standard we're using is really thinking about our own auditor. Again, we're fundraising for this program. We're committing to our donors that the funds are being used in the ways we've described. And so, we have to be able to, the worst case scenario, I don't want to say the worst case scenario, but a scenario would be our auditor would do some sampling, and then we would turn to you all, and then we would have to produce evidence that they were used as it was indicated. So if you can get a receipt, get it. If it's not too hard, you could just have a young person maybe sign an attestation. It's always that balance between low barrier versus, kind of CYA, and we want to trend on the low barrier. If we're asking young people to do all these different things, then we're undermining the goal of the program. So, if they can take a picture of a receipt, if you can take a picture of a receipt, if they can even take a picture of the thing that got fixed, do your best. I don't plan on being audited. I mean, we are audited every year. I don't plan on that being needed, but just that is kind of the reason why we ask for that. But I think we're all operating in good faith. You are all signing an MOU. And so, that's how we want to manage this program, is in good faith. And so it is a standard that you can determine. So again, if there's receipt, try and have it, take a picture of it, do what you can to document it. But we don't have specific standards that we're going to ask of you, just to do your best to ensure that the funds are used in the purpose that you've indicated on the youth disbursement form. So yeah, good morning. Thank you for the presentation. Are you able to share the questions you'll ask students during the interview? Yes, absolutely. We would be happy to do that. They said this person is saying they've had some students decide not to participate because they're not sure what will be asked of them. That's a great idea. And absolutely no pressure. We don't want any individual receiving support to feel like the interview is a condition. You know, if you got the more extroverted students who like talking, who like, you know, explaining things, that's great. But we don't want any young person to feel it is conditioned on that, because it certainly is not. We'll get the young people that we need kind of just through one way or the other. So here's a comment. It would be great to include an attachment spot on the submission form as well for our own record keeping as well. I see. So a attachment, something on the form where whatever documentation can be attached. Okay. Loris and I will kind of talk about that and see if we can maybe add that to it for organizations where that would be helpful. And let's see, a few more comments about the flyer. So here's a comment. We developed an application process and emailed students about these funds. We had 50+ responses. We learned about many different challenges our students are facing. We're not able to award all students. We're hoping to get more funds next year. How do you determine who will get the $9,000, like in the range of money? That's kind of similar to the first kind of question. We have to see kind of how many organizations they are. The application does include how many young people you serve. And so kind of based on that, we will look at that as well. But, we know we don't have a crystal ball. We can't see exactly what everyone's doing. And so rather than try and make these decisions using information we don't have perfect information on, we're trending more towards, giving you the resources. That being said, I do want to say, as all of you know, state funding in the state legislature recently increased support for the Next Up program to go statewide. And many of the organizations that participate in the program are community college programs. And so I do think we're going to operate the program per usual this year, but we are going to step back and reflect on how to kind of learn from you. Like, where did Next Up fill in the gaps? What gaps still remain? Because it is a little bit strange for us sometimes, like some programs who really are not spending the money. And it could be like it's just not really needed. Other times it's a timing issue. But we've got $30 million coming down to campus support programs for foster youth at the UC, CSU, and community college level. And so is this, after this year's program, a time to step back and say, okay, there's a lot of public funding going there. That has to do a lot of different things. It's not like it's just sitting around in a jar to be given away. But at the same time, to really reflect and think, how can we make sure these pretty scarce resources go where they're needed most? But we're not doing that this year. This year, we're re-engaging with all the same organizations we did last year. And we'll, invite everyone to be part of that conversation if we refocus where these funds go. Again, we know we're not McKinsey Scott. It's not a lot of money, but we do believe it can be helpful at the right time when a young person really needs it. So I guess those are the questions we have. A few more questions about interviews. I think a few more comments about the flyer. We'll make sure to get that. And thanks for people who are expressing appreciation. We're the ones who really appreciate you. I mean, our job here is extremely easy. All we have to do is raise the money and send it out. And as those of you who know our work know that this is kind of one little slice of our work that's very different from everything else we do. Everything else we do is really policy advocacy, systems change, technical assistance, and training. And this is our little sliver of work where we get to do something a little bit different. It's very meaningful to us, and we couldn't do it without your partnership. So we appreciate that very much. Why don't I turn it over to Loris and Jeffrey and ask them if they have any kind of parting comments before we wrap up, or anything you'd like to say?
I just want to say thank you all for participating and for dispersing the funds to the youth. I appreciate, all the work that you all do. It's, as Amy mentioned, it's meaningful. And I look forward to, 23, 24, the upcoming year, to help, disperse these funds to youth. So I look forward to working with all of you for the upcoming year as well, and for the remaining 22, 23 year too. Don't worry, you'll be hearing from me in our weekly emails. So.
All right. I guess that's a wrap. But again, we're not going anywhere. You can always email us. You can just also pick up that phone. We will actually answer it. So we're happy to help in any way or answer any questions. I think in some ways what we've heard is, you are all professional administrators and you know how to administer large, complex funding. And in some ways, this thing is kind of a little bit of a different kind of thing. And so how to, it's something that is kind of so flexible, how it fits in. And so we're sending you a consistent message that there's a lot of discretion here and a lot of flexibility. Well, thanks for the hearts, guys. That's very sweet. I don't even know how to do that, but it sure is cute. All right, I think we'll call it a wrap. And thanks again for your time and have a great day. Bye.